Alright, what's up YouTube? So I got all my rods back from the machine shop, and now I'm in the process of putting the bearings inside the rods. So I wanted to show how to do it correctly and a couple of pointers to look for whenever you're doing this. So I got the rod here, and then the bearings I'm using are Clevite coated bearings. These are some bearings that I had left over from a friend's engine that we didn't need, so I kept these around for my eventual rebuild. So these are what's going in the rods. They're you can see the part number there. They're coated and they're standard thickness bearings. So one important thing to note whenever you're putting rod bearings in is there is an upper and a lower rod bearing. So as you can see if we can get the camera to focus on it. You can see right here on the bearing, it says lower. So this bearing will go in the lower part of the rod. This bearing should say upper. Wrong side. You can see right here, this bearing says upper. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the rod apart. Take the bolts out. Take this cap off. Alright, so the cap's off. One important thing to note on rods, and I didn't know this on my first engine build, so half the rods in the engine were in the wrong way. So if you look at this rod here, you can tell that this side of the rod is flat, and that this side of the rod right here has a chamfer on it. The chamfered side of the rod faces the crankshaft. So if you have, so I'll pull up another rod right here. So there's the chamfer side of the rod, so that would face the crankshaft. So this rod and this rod, the flat sides face each other on their respective journal of the crankshaft, and the chamfered sides face out towards the crank. And it also follows with the cap, or the bottom part of the rod. There's a flat side, as you can see here, and a chamfered side. So you have to reassemble the rod correctly, or things aren't gonna line up. So, as with before, I'm gonna clean, got some brake clean here on the cloth. I'm gonna clean the surface so there's no debris on it. Fun. Clean the back of the bearings. Make sure there's nothing on them. Okay. Find this is my upper bearing. As you can see here on the rod, there is having a brain fart right now. There's the tang cut out for the tang on the bearing. You can see right there. So install that. That's installed. And I will install the lower. I'm going to verify that this is my lower bearing. Lower part of the rod. Tang goes to tang here. Install that. Okay, so once I've got these installed, I take the rod, and I want to make sure that I put this bottom part of the rod back on correctly to the top part of the rod. So what I did already, and there were numbers on this rod, but because it was balanced, the guys, I don't want to say ground, but they they polished the numbers off to get the weights on the rods correctly. So what I've done is I've already numbered my rods to my pistons. So I know that number 7 and number 7 go together. Another way that I can check is to make sure that the flat part on the side that faces the rod, the other rod, and the side that faces the crankshaft of the rod, I make sure that they line up on the top half and the bottom half. And as you can see, I haven't put the rod completely together yet, but put it together. As you can see, the bearing lines up. The top half and the bottom half line up. And you can see that the tangs line up. Both tangs are on the same side. So if I would have put this on wrong, I'll show you what to look for. So if I would have put these on backwards, you can see that the bearing does not line up. It's off on both sides. So make sure that whenever you're doing this, you put the bottom part of the rod on in the right position. So I'm gonna get all the bearings put in these rods, and then I'm gonna go measure my crankshaft and measure for bearing clearances. Alright, so I got all my rods torqued and the rod vise, and now I'm going to measure the oil clearance on the rod bearings. So the first thing that I'm going to do is get my 2 to 3 inch outside micrometer, and I'm going to measure the journal for the perspective rod. Now I've already went ahead and measured all the rod journals, and they all measure out the same. Exactly the same, but I'll go ahead and measure this one for you guys and show you how to do it. So put the mic on here and be careful not to scratch the journal of the crank, and try to get the top point and bottom point of the mic even on the journal so you get accurate measurement. You just turn this slip clutch here, kind of move the mic around a little bit. Work all the slop out. Get your lock over here. Take the mic off. And then you take your outside mic and you grab your dial bore gauge. I already have the dial bore gauge set up for this diameter here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this dial bore gauge inside of the mic, and this is kind of challenging without a vise, and let's see if I can show you guys. So I'm putting this in here, moving it around, and then I'll show you what the gauge looks like, what I'm looking for. I want to zero this gauge out. Takes a little bit of practice. Looks like I'm about 1/10 off, so I'll adjust this here just a little bit and recheck it. And in case you guys are wondering why I'm not in my garage and I'm in my house, it's because my garage is cold, and whenever you're taking these measurements, you want everything to be the same temperature. So it's about 70 degrees in my house, and I've had all this stuff in the house inside for probably about a week. So everything, all the metal is about the same temperature. And there you have it. Gauge is roughly zeroed out. So once that's zeroed out, grab my rod with the bearing in and the rod's torqued. I'm going to put this into this dial bore gauge inside of the rod. Move it back and forth so you can see it's in there. Move it back and forth. And where that gauge starts to rock back is what my measurement's going to be. So it looks like it's would be 23 thousandths, or it would be 2 thousandths 3/10 actually. So I'll do that for all my bearings, and that's what I'll come out with on the for the oil clearance. So I've already done it, and I got roughly between 2 thousandths 3/10 and 2 thousandths 6/10 on all of them. So that's a pretty good clearance. I want to say like the high end is like 2 thousandths 7/10, 2 thousandths 8/10. So it's a little on the loose side, but that's not a bad thing considering how hard I'm going to push the engine and whatnot. So that's all I got for now.